If you've recently found out that you have Hashimoto's, you may be wondering if going on a gluten-free diet is something that's worth pursuing. Maybe you heard eating gluten can cause or trigger Hashimoto's thyroid disease, or you heard that people with Hashimoto's disease often have celiac disease. Maybe you tried a gluten-free diet for a couple months and didn't notice much improvement, so you went back to eating gluten. Well, in today's video, I'm going to answer all of these questions because chances are your doctor is not going to take the time to tell you any of the things we're going to talk about in today's video. I hope that you'll stay tuned and be sure that you watch this video to the very end because there's some things that I think you're going to find very interesting that you don't want to miss. If this is your first time on my channel, I'm Dr. Hagmeyer. I'm happy that you stumbled upon my video. You may not know it, but there's over 200 videos and counting on a variety of different subjects and topics that people who struggle with chronic health issues, especially thyroid problems, find interest in. If you're interested in learning why you have the problems that you do, you're going to want to come back to this channel over and over. So if you like today's video, be sure that you subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss any of the new video uploads and content. Research shows that a significant relationship between celiac disease and Hashimoto's, and that's because Hashimoto's disease and celiac disease share many of the same common symptoms and causes. Following a gluten-free diet is not only essential for people with celiac disease, but research shows that a gluten-free diet can also have a tremendous therapeutic benefit for people with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Celiac disease, if you don't already know, it's an autoimmune disease whereby your immune system attacks and destroys the intestinal villi each and every time that you eat gluten. In Hashimoto's thyroiditis, this too is an autoimmune disease, but with Hashimoto's, your immune system really is destroying and attacking your thyroid gland, and this leads to hypothyroidism. With Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the immune system thinks that the thyroid gland is an invader, and because it thinks that the thyroid is an invader and really not part of your body, it does what it's supposed to do anytime an intruder or an invader comes to the body. It attacks it with the intent of killing it. Now, we know that your thyroid is not an invader. Unfortunately, your immune system doesn't. So this attack causes your thyroid to shut down. As a result, the thyroid stops producing thyroid hormones and you experience all the symptoms of low thyroid. Now, you should know that there is a very good chance that if you're watching this video, you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, then there's a very good chance that you actually have Hashimoto's disease and don't know it. You see, here in the United States, the #1 cause of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's disease. So 9 out of 10 times, if you have hypothyroidism, you probably have Hashimoto's and don't know it. And studies show that people with celiac disease are 4 to 6 times more likely to have Hashimoto's because the two conditions share the same genes and they share many of the same symptoms. Now, another fact regarding Hashimoto's or celiac disease is that once you have these, you're at risk for other autoimmune diseases like lupus, type 1 diabetes, pernicious anemia. When patients find out that they have Hashimoto's, they naturally want to know if there is really anything that they can do to stop the damage caused by the immune system. Are there certain vitamins that you should take? What kind of diet should you follow? Are there certain things that you should stop eating? Perhaps some of you have asked your doctor this exact question, if there's anything that you can do for your Hashimoto's disease. And if you're like most of my patients, your doctor probably said that there's nothing that diet, there's nothing that vitamins, there's nothing that you can do to help yourself. Probably the only thing your doctor or endocrinologist told you is take this thyroid medication and come back in 6 months. Well, lucky for you, your doctor and endocrinologist are 100% wrong. There is so much that can be done. There's a lot that can be done when patients have Hashimoto's thyroid disease, and you can do it naturally. And this is why I do the videos that I do. I'm going to go over a few things that you can start doing today so you can better understand your problem. So what is gluten and how does gluten affect your thyroid and how does it trigger Hashimoto's disease? Well, gluten is a storage protein that's found in wheat, it's found in barley, and it's found in rye. And if you were diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you were diagnosed because you have increased levels of certain thyroid antibodies. You may have elevated thyroid peroxidase antibodies or TPO antibodies. You may have elevated thyroglobulin antibodies or anti-thyroglobulin. Sometimes people have both of these, which really is double trouble if that's you. People with Hashimoto's tend to have higher levels of these thyroid antibodies when they eat gluten. And many people with Hashimoto's, like I already mentioned, unknowingly have celiac disease. And because, again, there's so many similar symptoms. You have hair loss, you have infertility, you have fatigue, you have painful joints, you have brain fog, you have weight gain, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have hormonal imbalances. Studies have found that following a gluten-free diet can be of tremendous benefit for people with autoimmune thyroid disease for a number of reasons. The problem with consuming gluten when you have Hashimoto's thyroid disease is that it contains a protein called gliadin. And gliadin, from a molecular standpoint, looks a lot like the enzyme TPO, or thyroid peroxidase. And because it's so similar, when you eat gluten, there is the potential for these sensitized gluten antibodies to mistakenly attack the thyroid gland at the same time it attacks the gluten protein. Because again, it thinks that your thyroid is an intruder. And we call this molecular mimicry. So every time that you eat gluten, what happens is that your body remains in this constant state of battle. These antibodies to gliadin, or even tissue transglutaminase in the case of celiac disease, also cause the body to attack the thyroid gland. But what's worse is for the patient with celiac disease or even gluten sensitivity is that the immune system's response to gluten and its attack can last up to 6 months each and every time you decide to cheat just a tiny little bit. This again is one reason why you really want to say goodbye to gluten if you have autoimmune thyroid disease, and obviously without a doubt if you have celiac disease. Don't listen to anyone who says you can cheat now and then, or you can just cut down on the amount of gluten that you eat. They're not reading the research. There's no 80-20 rule here. There's no 90-10 rule. There's no cheating when it's your birthday. If you have Hashimoto's thyroid disease and you continue to eat gluten, you're going to have destruction to your thyroid gland. And again, if your goal is to stop that process, you're going to want to give this up completely. So we've already talked about the misdirected immune system's attack, this molecular mimicry on the thyroid gland. You eat gluten and gliadin due to the similarity of gluten with thyroid peroxidase. The immune system triggers this an attack on the thyroid. But there are other reasons I want you to know why eating gluten can trigger autoimmune thyroid disease and potentially even other autoimmune diseases. There are proteins that are found in wheat besides gliadin that are also problematic for other reasons. Lectins or wheat germ agglutinin, for example, are gut irritants, but they're also found in beans, nuts, and seeds. Some people who get tested for gluten sensitivity or celiac disease are often tested for something called gliadin. But keep in mind that gliadin is not the only problem for people. And if your doctor only tests you for gliadin and you have a gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance, they're going to miss it. And this is a big problem inside. And here's why. Inside a kernel of wheat, there are many things that you can be reacting to. You can have a problem with wheat germ agglutinin, again, which is a lectin. If you're eating corn or oats or other grains, you could be reacting to those as well. And that's because lectins are like sandpaper. They're like an abrasion. They're an irritation to the gut. Once this happens, this creates an inflammatory reaction, and that contributes to intestinal permeability, also known as a leaky gut. You see, the gut is a very complex system. It has a border control that selectively keeps things out of your bloodstream that it doesn't want there. Every day you swallow millions of random bacteria, dust particles, dyes, bacteria, and these need to be eliminated from your body. We don't want them getting reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Inflammation in the gut caused by gluten or these other proteins like lectins, they damage the border control. It loosens the junctions between the cells, and now what happens is the gut becomes more permeable. Foreign particles or proteins can enter into the bloodstream, where they don't belong. And then this process of these unwanted chemicals in the bloodstream is what we call a leaky gut. But again, in the world of medicine and in medical journals, you're not going to see it referred to as leaky gut in most cases. We call it intestinal hyperpermeability because that sounds a whole lot smarter. All right, here's the thing though. Study after study shows that gluten accelerates this leaky gut by stimulating the release of a protein called zonulin. You can see that. I'll post an image here. And this zonulin is just one of many structural proteins that maintains this border control. So if you've been tested and you have elevated zonulin levels or you have elevated occludin levels, this indicates that you have a breakdown in your intestinal barrier and that you have a leaky gut. It also means that things are getting into your bloodstream that really could trigger an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's thyroid disease or these other autoimmune diseases that I mentioned a moment ago. For some people, this shows, this is how heavy metals and food particles or food proteins, bacterial toxins, mycotoxins, how they cause brain fog and anxiety and fatigue and joint pain and hormonal problems and chemical sensitivities, and the list goes on and on. So now you may be wondering and saying to yourself, well, geez, I'm glad I'm not eating gluten. I haven't touched gluten in the last 5 years. Well, here's the problem. You may have given up wheat and rye and barley, but like I said just a minute ago, these are not the only foods that you're getting exposure to with these gut irritants. Many of these so-called gluten-free grains like oats and corn and rice, as well as beans, nuts, and seeds, They have their own kind of lectins that can be a gut irritant, which can then trigger on that leaky gut. You see, once you have a leaky gut, you now have the potential for triggering autoimmune diseases like the Hashimoto disease, like celiac disease, like type 1 diabetes, like rheumatoid arthritis. You know, a few years ago, I did a video on lectins and rheumatoid arthritis. And if you have chronic pain or fibromyalgia, you really want to check that video out. And here's why. RA is a powerful, painful autoimmune disease that destroys the joints of the body. It attacks your fingers, your hip, your wrists, your knees, your spine. I saw firsthand how rheumatoid arthritis destroyed my grandmother's life and how she lived in chronic pain for years. Eventually, the rheumatoid arthritis destroyed her knee joints so bad she couldn't walk. She had to be pushed around in a wheelchair. We couldn't hug grandma because the slightest amount of pressure would cause her pain. In the last 10 years of her life, I just remember her being bedridden. So keep this all in mind when it comes to gluten and Hashimoto's and the potential for other autoimmune diseases. There's no cheating here. So here's the thing. There are a few other things that I want you to know about when it comes to gluten and Hashimoto disease that, again, most doctors are just not going to tell you. I've already talked about gluten being similar to the enzyme made in the thyroid called thyroid peroxidase. I also just talked about gluten and wheat germ agglutinin and the lectins and how they trigger autoimmunity by being gut irritants that ultimately lead to this leaky gut. But we're not done yet. Your gut microbiome is critically important. And for many people, this gut flora is a collection of friendly bacteria that, again, are living in your gut. These gut bacteria help regulate your immune system. They control that permeability, that barrier that we just talked about. They help you digest your food. They help make B vitamins and vitamin K. They help make neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And these bacteria regulate hormones. They regulate motility. But if you have celiac disease or you have a sensitivity to wheat germ agglutinin or gluten or lectins, the inflammation that these irritants cause can change this microbiome for the worse. And that's why people with celiac disease and gluten intolerance, they often have very bad problems with their microbiome. But there's also good news here, is that studies show that when you stop eating gluten and you eliminate these other irritants, these problems like leaky gut and inflammation and intestinal dysbiosis are significantly reduced. Once again, it's not limited to only people who have celiac disease. This information also applies to those people who have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So with all these reasons that I've reviewed with you in today's video, in my opinion, continuing to eat gluten when you have a confirmed autoimmune condition, whether it's Hashimoto's, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, Addison's, pernicious anemia, it simply isn't worth the risk of immune destruction that it's going to cause. So as I wrap up today's video, I want to hear from you. Drop me a comment or a question for me in the section below. What's been your experience with gluten or celiac disease or leaky gut or lectins? What happens to your thyroid symptoms when you eat gluten? Does it flare up your Hashimoto's? Does it intensify your thyroid symptoms? Do your joints start hurting? Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to know more about working with me or my clinic, or you have some additional questions, I'll leave a few links in the description box. I'll also leave some links on other articles that are related to gluten and lectins and leaky gut, just in case this is something that you want to dig into just a little bit deeper down the road. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'm Dr. Hagmeyer, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.